Kyle Pratt boarded the plane with her 6-year-old daughter, Julia. She was transporting her husband's coffin back home after his recent death. As they stepped onto the aircraft, Kyle felt a mix of grief and relief. She expected a quiet flight, but something caught her eye. The crew was loading her husband's coffin into the cargo hold. Seeing it being taken away made her anxious, but she pushed the feeling aside. Julia seemed restless, so Kyle suggested they lie down and sleep. She hoped rest would calm them both. Little did she know, something strange was about to happen. After a few hours, Kyle woke up. Julia's seat was empty. At first, she stayed calm, thinking Julia had gone to the bathroom. She checked the nearby restroom, but Julia wasn't there. Kyle searched the whole cabin, row by row. Kyle went to the flight attendants for help. She explained that Julia was missing. One attendant suggested Julia might be in the galley area. Kyle rushed there, hoping to find her. But it wasn't Julia, just another passenger grabbing a snack. Disappointed, Kyle returned to the attendants. She begged them to search the plane. They agreed and started asking passengers if anyone had seen a young girl. No one had. The crew thought Kyle was overreacting. They tried to comfort her, promising to tell the captain. But time passed and nothing happened. Kyle grew frustrated. A man sitting nearby spoke up. He said he hadn't seen a girl with Kyle at all. She ignored him and noticed the flight attendants talking on the phone. She hurried over, asking if they had news about Julia. The attendant hung up and turned to Kyle. She said they'd contacted the airport. There was no record of Julia boarding the plane. The airline had no documentation of her daughter. Kyle couldn't believe it. Julia had slept right next to her. How could she disappear without a trace? To prove herself, Kyle reached for Julia's boarding pass. It wasn't in her bag. She ran back to her seat thinking it might be there. She opened the overhead bin. Julia's backpack was gone too. Julia was only 6. She couldn't have wandered off alone. Kyle's panic surged. She was sure someone had taken her daughter. The flight attendants urged her to calm down, but she refused. She demanded to speak to the captain herself. Other passengers stared, annoyed by her behavior. Kyle marched toward the cockpit, determined to get answers. Just then Gene Carson, the air marshal, stepped in. He pressed her against the door, stopping her. Carson warned that her actions threatened the flight's safety. The commotion reached the captain, who came out to investigate. He checked the passenger list again. No one on the crew had seen Julia either. Kyle insisted she wasn't lying. The captain asked if she'd been drinking or taking medicine. He wondered if her mind was playing tricks on her. Kyle admitted she'd taken anti-anxiety drugs. Her husband had just died, and her doctor prescribed them. She explained that she and Julia were on this trip to bring his body home. The coffin was in the cargo hold as proof. But that didn't explain where Julia was. The captain turned to Carson, who'd been seated near Kyle. He asked if Carson had seen the girl. Carson said no. Kyle's voice cracked with emotion. She swore Julia had boarded the plane. She hadn't been drinking or over-medicating. The captain suggested she might be hallucinating. Kyle's distress looked real. The captain decided to trust her, at least for now. He ordered a full search of the plane. Passengers returned to their seats, grumbling. The crew checked every luggage compartment and corner where a child might hide. They even looked in the air conditioning ducts. The search turned up nothing. Julia's backpack and boarding pass were still missing. Kyle walked through the cabin, checking each seat herself. As she passed a bearded man, dizziness hit her. She steadied herself, refusing to give up. But that would have to wait until they landed. Suddenly, Kyle remembered something. Before the flight, at the hotel, she'd seen 2 sneaky men watching her. She suspected they had Julia. She ran to tell the captain. She pointed out the bearded man, claiming he was one of them. The bearded man said he'd seen Kyle at the hotel. He pulled out his bill to prove it. This confused the other passengers. Carson stepped in, pulling Kyle away. She lunged at the man, insisting she'd seen him with another person. Carson forced her back, warning her about handcuffs if she didn't stop. Kyle wouldn't back down. Carson questioned her story. If those men wanted Julia, why take her on a plane? He pointed out there was no record of Julia's name. He asked her tough questions she couldn't answer. He believed she had a mental problem. The captain ended the search, letting passengers move freely again. Kyle was furious. She demanded to know why they'd stopped. The captain revealed new information. The hospital reported that both her husband and Julia had died. They jumped from their building together. Kyle shook her head in disbelief. Her husband had died, yes. But she'd been with Julia for a week after that. Tears streamed down her face. She couldn't accept this lie. Carson restrained her again. A therapist on board offered to help. Losing her husband and daughter could break anyone, she said. Kyle seemed to calm down. She thought of Julia's smile and their happy moments. Then she turned her head. A heart Julia had drawn on the window caught her eye. Her daughter had been here. This proved everything was wrong. Kyle asked to use the bathroom. Carson untied her handcuffs, letting her go. Inside, she took off her jacket. She climbed onto the toilet and smashed the vent open. Carson knocked on the door, sensing trouble. Kyle ignored him. She crawled through the vent and found an electrical panel. Using a coin, she opened it. She pulled a wire, and oxygen masks dropped in the cabin. Passengers panicked, thinking it was an emergency. Kyle pulled another wire. The plane's power cut out. Chaos erupted as the cabin went dark. Kyle slipped out of the bathroom. She avoided Carson's sight and headed to the cargo hold. The captain emerged, telling Carson someone had tampered with the power. They checked the bathroom. Kyle was gone. Kyle kept searching below. In the cargo hold, she saw her husband's coffin. A bad feeling hit her. She entered the code and opened it. Only her husband's body lay inside. This made her certain Julia was still on the plane. If both had died, there'd be 2 coffins. Carson appeared, grabbing her. He said her actions could crash the plane. Kyle didn't care. Knowing Julia was alive gave her hope. Carson dragged her back to the cabin. He said she'd be taken away when they landed. Passengers stared, thinking she was crazy. Kyle stayed firm. She believed Julia was on the plane. She begged Carson to help her. If she was arrested, no one would look for Julia. He seemed moved but stuck to his decision. As they walked through the corridor, Kyle noticed something odd. Carson didn't head to the cockpit. He took the elevator to the cargo hold instead. There he pulled out a bomb. It was a conspiracy. Julia was on the plane, and Carson was behind it. He set the detonator and contacted the airport. He claimed Kyle was a terrorist demanding $50 million. If they didn't pay, he'd blow up the flight. Carson had used her husband's coffin to smuggle the explosives. Kyle realized the truth. The captain wanted to confront her, but Carson stopped him. He said Kyle was dangerous. Carson suggested the airline pay the money to save everyone. They could catch her later. He acted fearless, returning to the cabin. A flight attendant, his partner, joined him. She'd faked the hospital report and changed the passenger list. The flight attendant grew nervous. Carson calmed her, saying the bomb would erase all evidence after landing. He went back to Kyle and uncuffed her. He told her to wait until everyone left. Police would search then. The plane landed, and passengers exited. Kyle saw the captain approach. She rushed to him, sure she'd find Julia. The captain apologized, saying the airline paid the ransom. This confused Kyle. Carson was losing control. Kyle pretended to follow the police but got off the plane. She trailed Carson. Seeing officers, she recalled the captain's words. Something clicked. She called out to Carson, startling him. He threatened that if she spoke, she'd never see Julia again. After the crew left, Carson locked the cargo hold door. Kyle knocked him out and cuffed him to a rail. The flight attendant appeared with a gun. Kyle dodged her shot and locked herself in the cockpit. Carson broke free and chased her. He revealed the full plan. Her husband hadn't killed himself. They'd murdered him for his plain knowledge. Kyle was their perfect target. International rules kept the coffin from being scanned, hiding the bomb. They'd taken Julia after Kyle slept, framing her as a hijacker. Kyle had opened the vent to trick Carson. Now, she searched for Julia. She found her in the avionics section, unconscious. Carson closed in with the bomb ticking. Kyle fought him off. She locked him in the cargo hold and grabbed Julia. As they ran, the bomb exploded. Carson was gone. Kyle held Julia tight. They hid until help arrived. Her love and courage had saved her daughter.